3, 2, 1.
You ready?
You're listening to the Real Pineapple Podcast Network.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Real Pineapple. This is your humble host, Hunter, here. Hope you guys are having a great October so far. So I've got a review here for Vampires vs. the Bronx, which is a new Netflix film, which is directed by Osmani Rodriguez. Osmani Rodriguez has done some Saturday Night Live, some stuff for Saturday Night Live. Good grief, for Saturday Night Live, for Mixed Dish, stuff here and there. The big thing he's been doing recently is AP Bio, which, if you guys haven't listened to the podcast, I adore AP Bio. So I saw that and went, oh, okay. And I will say, if there is something about this movie, it is very much directed like a TV show, like an episode of a TV. It feels like a made-for-TV movie. And I think that part in particular, because the biggest comparison as far as a film, like, to this, I kept comparing this to Attack the Block. Now, if you guys haven't seen Attack the Block, first off, why haven't you seen Attack the Block? It's absolutely amazing. Secondly, this just isn't as good as Attack the Block, which, fair or not, I was holding and am holding against this film. I was like, well, I really wanted this to be more fun and just to have more of this sense of adventure. Ironically enough, I think it should have been more akin to something like The Watch. Not that vulgar, obviously, but I think they really should have kind of went more that vibe. But as it is, Jaden Micahel, who plays Miguel, you know him from The Get Down, which was a Netflix series, which I saw some clips here and there. At some point, I'm going to sit down and watch it. I heard mixed stuff, but curious about it. But he plays Miguel, and he is very much this kind of free-thinking kid, challenges things, which I did appreciate. There are things about this that I really do enjoy. Even though I mentioned it's shot like a made-for-TV film, I really did like the cinematography. It just had this, and this is going to sound almost like a backhanded compliment, it had this almost this simplicity to it. It felt like very old school hip-hop, like, in that sense. I actually really like the way that the cinematography almost felt like another character in the film. I know some people will disagree with that, and that's, fair enough, but that was something that I personally took away from it. I like the chemistry between Louise, who's played by Gregory Diaz IV, and Bobby, who's played by Gerald Jones III. I really like the chemistry between the three boys. The problem is we don't get enough of it. That for me is where there's a huge opportunity where the film really dropped the ball there. But the movie starts off with a cameo by Zoe Saldana, which I was like, oh, that's cool. Where she goes ahead, she's buying something at this grocery store. She goes ahead and ends up being attacked by a vampire. We go ahead and cut the present day, and Miguel is trying to go ahead and basically save the rec center. There's a save the rec center plot in this movie, and he goes ahead, so he's going ahead trying to gather awareness, get the troops rallied up. And there is this great scene where he's talking to these group of girls, like 3 of them, and the girl, I believe, is 16. I think they say that Miguel is 13 in the movie, or 13 or 14, I want to say. And he is kind of shooting his shot, and it's so funny where he's just like, look, we're doing this thing on Friday, like, maybe you should come through or something like that. Like, that would be cool. And it's so funny because Chris Redd is in this movie, and that's another, and I feel like I'm bagging on the movie more than I want to. He plays this dude Andre. Chris Redd, again, if you haven't listened to the podcast before, I'm a huge fan of Popstar. I think Chris Redd on SNL is excellent. I think him as a Hunter the Hungry in Popstar is fucking masterclass. I love Chris Redd in Pop Star so much. He was so much fucking fun, and I was so happy to see him in this. I was like, oh yeah, Chris Red, hell yeah. And he's barely used. He's only in a couple scenes, and this movie really did feel like it was rushed. And I think that's the part where, because some of the resources they have, you get Chris Red, you have Method Man in this as Father Jackson, who, you know, he's like runs the local church, because of course he does. Because Wu-Tang is for everyone, but but Father Jackson, Method Man is barely in this. Like, he's really not in it a lot at all throughout the film. And he maybe has 7 minutes, 8 minutes of screen time. Like, that's not enough for Method Man. And Method Man's a damn good actor. Actually, probably doesn't get enough credit for how great of an actor he can be. But seeing him in this, I got excited. But again, just how quickly they pull the rug out kind of from under you. There is that scene I was just talking about though with Miguel, where he's spitting game at these girls, and his mom yells down at him from upstairs, like you need to come clean your room. Like, why are your underwear smelling funky? And these girls are just like, oh shit. And I felt so bad for him, but that is the mama rule. She yelled at him twice. It's like, all right, after that, you're tempting fate. But that was something I really did get a very hard laugh out of. But the thing I will say that does help this movie a lot is that Miguel's very endearing. He wants to do the right thing. He really just isn't really sure how to go about it. And that does carry a lot of this for me, a lot of this film for me. Also, the very clear metaphor for gentrification with the vampires going ahead and wanting killing people of color to go ahead and just take over their businesses and take over their property. That gentrification metaphor, I thought for the most part, and it might seem silly because, you know, it's vampires, I actually thought that was actually executed really well. So I was really happy to see, again, something that people will, I think people will enjoy this. I don't think people will be in love with this, but I think this is, especially given the time of year, I think people will find stuff to enjoy about this. I thought the vampire effects were actually pretty well done. It reminded me more something like Vampire Diaries, because while this movie does have some humor, it is taking itself a little more seriously, more akin to something like the Vampire Diaries, I would say, versus something like Twilight. So I actually really like the creature the creature makeup for the vampires. There is this scene where the kids break into this crypt. They go ahead and discover this plot that that this company is buying up or getting rid of people and taking their property, because they're going ahead and having this huge they want to go ahead and basically build a giant crypt of all these coffins. And it's actually the plot I actually thought was pretty interesting for what it was. I was like, okay, that's actually a pretty cool little wrinkle. I like that. The movie itself in that aspect works really well. I think some of the more horror elements, I thought, okay, this actually is pretty decent. The problem is that it feels like it wants to be Vampire Stranger Things. And one thing you can't say about the Stranger Things is that the kids, not only do they have chemistry, but they do a really good job, as far as, for me at least, as far as the comedy. It's a funny show when it needs to be. And I thought that while there are some punchlines here that I actually really did appreciate, there is this subplot of these gang members, which I'll be honest, really didn't need to be there. And that's probably one of my other complaints, is that they have Bobby, who has, you know, the single mom, the dad's no longer there. And, you know, there's that struggle of, is Bobby going to become part of the streets? And I just remember thinking, you have vampires invading the hood. Like, you really don't need to have this extra subplot. You can just stick with the kids being the kids. Like, I thought that was unnecessary, and it did kind of take me out of the movie. But because it leads to the whole nothing fight with them being friends, it's like, but we're supposed to be friends. That that sort of fight, and I just didn't think it was well executed. I realize I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm so conflicted on this film because as I'm watching it, I'm going, if I had seen this in the theater, and I fully admit I have to be very careful to not over obliviate and just go. I don't want to. I miss the theater experience so much. I don't want to go like, oh, if I just saw anything in the theater, it'd be like a higher grade. But I think if I'd seen this even for an early matinee, I would have been like, you know what, this is all right. But the movie just kind of ends in a way that I went, that's rather odd, and that's all I'll say as far as how it wraps up. They end up working with this other girl. I believe her name is Rita, who's played by Coco Jones, and she is this girl who is she's this girl who actually knows about vampires and actually is like read up on them. And so I actually liked Rita. She's probably my favorite character outside of Miguel. The other thing I did, okay, that is something I actually do want to bring up. The way they learn about vampires, Miguel, Bobby, and Louise, the way they learn how to fight vampires is they watch Blade because, and I cannot find the guy's name, but Tony, I think it's Tony. He's a shop owner and like the convenience store shop owner, and he goes ahead and shows them Blade. And so they legit learn how to fight these vampires because of watching fucking Blade. And that was something I did find incredibly funny. So, like, again, this movie is not devoid of stuff that will make people go like, oh, okay, right on. Like, there's a point where one of the gangsters calls Louise Puerto Rican Harry Potter, and that was something I laughed out loud at. I was like, oh my god, that was terrible. Okay. There are some punchlines here that are actually really well done. There's this one scene in the convenience store between someone who ends up becoming a vampire, and I'll just leave it at that. There's one character that as soon as you see them, you go, oh, you're gonna be okay, good to know. But there's this one really great tense scene, you'll know it when you see it, in this convenience store that I thought was really like, wow, okay, I appreciate it, like how genuinely tense that scene was. Also, there are ways that they have the vampires come into frame at some points. Like you'll see just a hand come through, or just like their fangs at first, something like that. The way that they film those scenes, and you'll notice it when you watch the film. I really loved how they did that. There are just these things that they go ahead and do with the movie that I was like, okay, that's I like this. I like this a lot. There is stuff about it, again, like I've talked about, that you can go ahead and pick apart. But I think this is exactly where it needs to be. It's on Netflix. You don't have to go out and see it. And if you have 13-year-olds, I think you could show, because they really don't even show gore, like really any gore in this, even when people are getting bit, which I thought was kind of lame, but whatever. For me, you could probably show a 13-year-old this. They've probably seen worse, if we're being honest, but I enjoyed this enough, so I'm gonna give this a C+. I thought this was fun. Again, my biggest frustration comes from the film because I just realized it could have been something like great, and I think they just stopped short of it because they just kind of didn't care. So that's where my frustration comes in. But I digress. Vampires versus the Bronx. What did you think? Let us know what you thought in the comments below. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter at jhunterrealpineapple. You can follow Scott on Twitter at Nearman1st. You can go ahead and like us on Facebook at The Real Pineapple. And you can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Podbean, SoundCloud, iHeart, and Stitcher Radio, and Spotify, and Amazon Music at The Real Pineapple. Thank you so much for listening. We'll have reviews up for Blade and Blade 2. Have reviews up as well soon for Harley Quinn Season 1 and for the OG Halloween, which I am excited to sit down and talk about. And we'll have a review as well for the first Borat ahead of the new one, which I am so excited to talk about that. But everyone, please, 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 please stay safe out there. I know things are crazy right now, but please stay safe out there. Wear a mask. Take care of each other. We love you and thank you so much for the support. And we will talk to you soon. Take care.